I remember the sound before I remember the pain, the way my own sobs echoed off the bathroom tiles. Sharp, uncontrollable, animal. My hands were shaking, clutching the crumpled sonogram picture that no longer meant life. I didn't know someone was watching me, recording me, turning my private heartbreak into something sellable. My name is Alyssa Carter, and 3 months ago my brother made $50,000 selling footage of my breakdown after my miscarriage to a reality TV show. When I found out, he looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Your pain finally has value." And the worst part? My parents called it smart business. Before I can tell you what happened, you need to understand the kind of family I come from. The Carters are what my mother likes to call a brand. Appearances matter more than emotions. My father, Thomas, built a small but loud reputation as a businessman in Seattle. My mother, Elaine, runs her life like a social media campaign. Curated smiles, selective empathy, and absolute denial of anything messy or real. Then there's Ryan, my younger brother. Their golden child. Charming, ambitious, endlessly confident. The kind of person who could lie straight to your face and make you thank him for it. He always had a camera in his hand, documenting everything. For my content, he'd say, birthdays, dinners, arguments, nothing was off limits. And me? I was the quiet one. The art teacher who painted feelings instead of talking about them. The one who believed in family more than fame. When I found out I was pregnant, I thought maybe things would change. Ryan actually hugged me that day, the first real hug in years. Mom said, "Finally, something happy to post." Dad smiled and said, "See, life is moving forward." For a brief moment, I believed we were healing. But then, life stopped. 6 months into my pregnancy, I lost the baby. A small heartbeat that once echoed inside me suddenly went silent. The doctors called it unexplained fetal demise. I called it the death of everything I was. I spent days locked in the bathroom, sitting on the cold floor, unable to speak. My husband Ethan tried to help, but there was no language for that kind of grief, only sound, raw, broken, and endless. And in that darkness, I thought I was alone. I wasn't. 3 weeks later, Ryan came over. He said he wanted to check on me. He brought coffee, cracked a few awkward jokes, and told me I needed to move on. I didn't notice that he kept glancing toward the hallway shelf, the one with the fake plant that didn't quite sit right. That's where he'd hidden the camera. I didn't know it at the time. I only learned later, after everything exploded. He left that day saying, "You'll thank me one day. Pain makes good stories." Yarnspiem. I tried to heal. Tried to breathe again. I stopped painting. I stopped answering calls. Then one evening, I turned on the TV to drown out the silence, and there I was. On a national reality show called Families Under Fire. They titled the segment, "Teacher Loses Baby, Family Tries to Help Her Heal." There was my face, swollen, tear-streaked, shaking on the bathroom floor. My voice cracked through the speakers. "Why me? Why my baby?" The audience gasped. The hosts whispered words like bravery and raw emotion, and underneath it all, a small on-screen note, footage provided by Ryan Carter. I froze. The remote slipped from my hand. Ethan rushed in from the kitchen, thinking something was wrong. When he saw the TV, his jaw locked. I could see the fury in his eyes, but all I felt was numbness. My phone began to buzz. Co-workers, old friends, even students' parents. "Alyssa, are you okay? I just saw your episode. I'm so sorry." Wait, was that real? I sat there, trembling, staring at the credits. Footage provided by Ryan Carter. The name glowed like a wound I couldn't close. When I confronted him the next morning, he didn't even flinch. He sipped his coffee and said, "They paid $50,000. Do you know how hard it is to get that kind of deal? People loved your story, Alyssa. You made people feel something." I could barely breathe. "You sold my breakdown, Ryan." He smirked. "Relax. You looked real, raw. People love authenticity." That word, authenticity, felt like acid. I told my parents, expecting outrage, maybe even protection. Mom sighed and said, "Well, it's not ideal, but at least it helped Ryan get exposure." Dad added, "He's young. He's just being smart. You should be proud." He turned pain into opportunity. I realized then that my family didn't see what he did as betrayal. They saw it as business. That's when I decided something quietly inside me. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't sue. I wouldn't let them film another performance. Not my rage, not my tears. I would stay silent. Because silence, I knew, has a longer memory than fame. And 3 months later, when my brother's own sex tape aired on national television, the same brother who told me my pain had value, he called me crying. "Alyssa, how did they get this? Please tell me you didn't—" I didn't have to say a word. The silence answered for me. Before everything fell apart, my life was small but peaceful. I used to wake up to the smell of coffee brewing and the soft hum of Ethan's off-key singing from the kitchen. Our house in Seattle's Green Lake neighborhood wasn't big, but it was warm, filled with half-finished paintings, tiny potted plants, and the kind of quiet that feels safe. I taught art at a local high school, spent weekends painting by the window, and believed that love could fix anything. For most of my life, I thought family meant loyalty. It meant people who stand by you when the world collapses. I didn't realize that in my family, loyalty had conditions, and privacy was just another thing to sell. My brother Ryan was 4 years younger than me and everything I wasn't. Bold, extroverted, obsessed with attention. From the time he was 15, he had a camera glued to his hand. He filmed everything, our family dinners, our arguments, even my 21st birthday where he zoomed in on my tears after a breakup, laughing while recording. Mom would pat his back and say, "He's creative, Alyssa. It's just his way of expressing himself." Dad would add, "He's got the drive you never had." I never argued. I just learned to stay out of his frame. Ryan always called himself a digital storyteller. What he really was, even then, was a collector of other people's moments. And somehow, my parents adored it. They treated his channel like a family trophy, even though he barely made rent. Every Thanksgiving, Mom would say, "Ryan's going to be famous one day, just wait." I'd smile politely and change the subject, pretending it didn't sting that she never spoke that way about my art exhibits. When Ethan and I found out I was pregnant, it felt like the universe had finally handed me light after years of quiet wanting. We'd been trying for almost 2 years. The doctor called it unexplained infertility. But to me, it felt like punishment for some sin I couldn't name. The day I saw those 2 pink lines, I cried. The good kind of crying. Ethan spun me around the living room like a kid. I remember calling my parents that night, my heart pounding with excitement. Mom's voice was flat. "Oh, that's nice." Dad just said, "Congratulations, sweetheart. Make sure you rest." Then Ryan interrupted in the background, shouting, "Can I film the gender reveal?" I laughed, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. From the start, he treated my pregnancy like content. When I'd visit my parents, he'd record me touching my stomach, zooming in, asking fake emotional questions like, "What does it feel like knowing you're going to be a mom?" Sometimes I'd tell him to stop. He'd grin and say, "Relax, Alyssa, you'll thank me when this goes viral." Mom would defend him. "He's just documenting a special time." It didn't feel special anymore. It felt like a performance I hadn't auditioned for. Then came the night everything ended. I was 24 weeks pregnant. Ethan and I had just finished dinner when I felt a cramp so sharp it made me drop my plate. Within hours, we were at the hospital. Bright lights, sterile air, too many people saying too many words. Fetal distress. Significant blood loss. Prepare for emergency delivery. I don't remember the rest clearly, only the silence that followed. The doctor's voice softened into static. "I'm so sorry. I never saw my baby breathe." Afterward, the house felt like a grave. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I spent hours sitting on the bathroom floor, clutching the hospital bracelet, replaying the heartbeat that used to echo from the monitor. Ethan tried everything: therapy appointments, warm tea, soft music. But grief doesn't listen to kindness. One night, I locked the bathroom door, sank to the floor, and whispered to the empty air, "I'm sorry. I should have protected you." That moment, that raw, unfiltered breakdown, would later be broadcast on national television without my consent. But back then, it was just pain. Private pain. Mine. Ryan came to visit a week after the funeral. He knocked, camera already in hand. "Hey, Alice, can I come in?" I nodded weakly, too drained to care. He hugged me, but his eyes weren't on me. They were scanning the room, calculating angles. He spoke softly, as if rehearsing, "You'll get through this. You're strong. People need to see that." I didn't know what he meant. I thought he was just trying to be comforting. Before leaving, he looked around one last time, adjusting a decorative shelf near the bathroom door. I remember him saying, "This house has good lighting, perfect for healing videos." I didn't realize he'd left a hidden camera behind that fake plant. For the next few weeks, I tried to heal in silence. My parents rarely called. When they did, Mom would say things like, "You need to move on. Dwelling doesn't bring the baby back." Dad would ask if I'd gone back to work yet. Their empathy was procedural, like small talk. Ryan texted me once, "I might do a short documentary on grief. Want to help? It could help people like you?" I never replied. Yeah, at the time, I thought my brother was simply clueless. I didn't realize he was already negotiating with producers from Families Under Fire, using my most private, shattered moments as his audition tape. And I had no idea that my family, the people who taught me to value trust above all else, were about to turn my tragedy into their profit. The night I saw myself on television, something inside me broke again. But this time, it wasn't grief for my baby. It was grief for the illusion of family. I was sitting on the couch, half wrapped in a blanket, trying to distract myself from another sleepless night. Ethan was making tea in the kitchen when the TV caught my attention. The screen showed the familiar bathroom tiles, cream-colored, slightly cracked near the corner. For a second, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. Then I saw myself, slumped on the floor, shaking, gasping between sobs, clutching that tiny hospital bracelet. At first, I couldn't process it. My body froze, my heart hammering against my chest. Then the camera panned closer, and I heard my own voice, broken and raw. "Why couldn't I save you? Please come back." It wasn't just footage. It was my breakdown, my lowest moment. Turned into content. The screen flashed the show's title, Families Under Fire. Then came the caption, "A young art teacher loses her unborn child, and her family helps her heal." The host spoke with practiced sympathy. Tonight, we share Alyssa's journey through loss and the extraordinary support of her brother, Ryan Carter, who documented her recovery to raise awareness about grief. Ethan dropped the mug he was holding. It shattered across the floor. "Alyssa, that's you." "I know," I whispered. My voice didn't sound human. As the camera zoomed in on my tear-streaked face, I saw Ryan in the corner of the frame, pretending to comfort me, brushing my hair back. The scene looked staged, scripted, as if my pain had been repurposed into a performance. And then, at the end of the segment, came the final insult, exclusive footage provided by Ryan Carter. The days that followed were chaos. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Texts, calls, voicemails, people I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly felt entitled to my trauma. "You were so brave on that show. I cried watching you. How did you let them film that? Some messages weren't kind. Anything for attention, huh? You should be ashamed for monetizing grief." I couldn't breathe under the weight of it all. My private pain was now public property, dissected, debated, consumed. Ethan was furious. "We're calling a lawyer," he said, pacing the living room. He had no right. None of them did. But I didn't answer. I couldn't. It wasn't just about the footage. It was about betrayal. A betrayal so personal it didn't even feel real yet. When I finally confronted Ryan, he acted like I was being dramatic. I drove to my parents' house, still shaking with rage. He was sitting in the living room, scrolling through his phone, a smirk on his face. "What did you do?" I asked. "What?" He looked up, feigning innocence. "You recorded me. You sold it. You made $50,000 off my grief." He leaned back in the chair, calm, almost amused. "Relax, Alyssa. It's not that deep. They wanted something real. You gave it to them. Your story's helping people." I stared at him speechless. "Helping who, Ryan? You or them?" "Both. Look, I did you a favor. You were just sitting around crying anyway. Now your pain means something. People are talking about you. You're inspiring others." Inspiring? That word made my stomach turn. "You stole from me," I said quietly. "You stole something I can never get back." He shrugged. "I didn't steal, I just shared. And honestly, you should be thanking me. You're finally relevant." That was when I realized he wasn't ashamed. Not even a little. When I told my parents, I thought they'd finally see reason. I thought maybe, for once, they'd choose me. But my mother's expression stayed cold and measured. "He's young, Alyssa. He didn't mean harm. He made $50,000 off my miscarriage." "Don't be vulgar," she snapped. "At least something good came out of that tragedy." My father folded his hands, his voice detached. "Your brother has initiative. He's building a name for himself. That's more than most people do. Maybe try to see it from a business point of view." A business point of view. That's what my pain had become. A transaction. Ethan wanted to drag them all to court, but I couldn't. I couldn't bear to make it bigger, to let them record my anger too. I didn't want another episode of Families Under Fire featuring Alyssa the Angry Sister. So I went silent. Yes, but silence doesn't mean surrender. While Ryan soaked in his 15 minutes of fame, podcasts, interviews, influencer sponsorships, I stayed invisible, quietly watching. I saw the clips, the hashtags, the comments praising his bravery for sharing his sister's story. I saw him attend events where he spoke about turning pain into purpose. And through it all, I never said a word, because deep down, I believed something Ethan whispered to me one night when I couldn't sleep. People like him always get exposed. They always do. You don't have to ruin him. The truth will. I didn't know it then, but Ethan was right. 3 months later, Ryan's own secrets, his private, shameful secrets, would become the next headline, and the world that applauded him for exploiting pain would soon watch his destruction in HD. I stopped speaking to my family after that confrontation. For weeks, my phone lit up with messages from my mother, half-hearted attempts at checking in, usually followed by something like, "Ryan's interview on Channel 7 was powerful. You should be proud of him." I never responded. I couldn't. Every time I saw his face online, smiling, polished, talking about raising awareness through authenticity, something in me twisted. He was standing on the ashes of my privacy, calling it art. But grief has a strange way of sharpening you. Once the tears ran dry, clarity crept in. The more I watched him glorify my pain, the less I wanted revenge, and the more I wanted understanding. I needed to know how he'd gotten away with it. So I began reading. Late nights turned into early mornings as I pored over articles about digital consent laws, media rights, and content exploitation. I learned how networks hid behind vague release forms, how influencers blurred the lines between documentation and invasion, how awareness often meant monetized trauma. And I realized something that chilled me. My brother wasn't unique. He was part of an entire culture built on exposure, where empathy was currency and suffering was entertainment. Notice I kept quiet. Ethan urged me to speak out, to post something, to tell my side. "You don't have to be silent, Alyssa," he said one night as we sat by the window, the city lights flickering across his face. "You didn't deserve what they did." I shook my head. "If I speak, I become part of their game. They want a reaction, another performance. I'm done performing." He nodded slowly, squeezing my hand. "Then don't react. Just rebuild." So I did. I started teaching again, part-time at first, then full days. My students didn't mention the show. Maybe they knew, maybe they didn't. But their quiet respect gave me something to stand on again. I began painting too. Not colorful landscapes like before, but darker, abstract pieces that bled emotion. I painted grief as shapes and betrayal as color. It was the only language that made sense anymore. Meanwhile, Ryan's career was soaring. He'd signed a deal for a docuseries about modern families and emotional resilience. My parents were ecstatic. He's finally making something of himself. Dad said at dinner one night, as if nothing had ever happened. He's being recognized for his creativity, Mom added. I stared at my plate and thought, for stealing mine. One Saturday, I drove to my parents' house to pick up some old art supplies I'd left behind. Ryan was there, his car parked in the driveway, windows tinted, arrogance practically radiating from it. Inside, he was bragging to Mom about a new brand deal. They want me to do a collaboration on mental health awareness. Imagine the exposure. When he saw me, he grinned. Hey, star of episode 12, he said. Still mad? I ignored him and went upstairs to the old study room. As I packed my things, I noticed the family computer humming softly. Ryan's external hard drive was plugged in, labeled in bold letters, Content Master. I hesitated. I shouldn't have looked. But curiosity, and maybe instinct, pulled me closer. I opened it. Inside were dozens of folders, raw footage, reels, personal edits. But one folder stood out, private footage. I clicked it, and there he was, Ryan, unfiltered, unedited, with his girlfriend caught on camera in ways no one should ever see. Some clips were labeled experimental, others B-roll. He'd clearly been filming private moments, probably planning to dramatize them for future episodes. I closed the folder immediately, my heart pounding. For a second, I felt disgust, not just at what I saw, but at how carelessly he treated privacy, even his own. He was addicted to exposure, blind to the idea that one day it could expose him. When I went downstairs, I looked him straight in the eye. Ryan, I said quietly, you should be careful with what you record. He laughed. What, you think I'll end up on TV like you? No, I said, picking up my box of art supplies. I think worse, because you never think anything's off limits, not even yourself. He rolled his eyes. Don't be dramatic, Alyssa. I control my narrative. Those words stuck with me. I control my narrative. I left the house that day not angry, not plotting revenge, just certain of one thing. People like him eventually run out of control. 2 weeks later, rumors began to spread online. Whispers on Reddit threads, fragments of leaked footage circulating on influencer gossip forums. At first, I didn't pay attention. The internet chews through scandals like breakfast. Then I saw his name trending. Shasa Ryan Carter leak. It wasn't just gossip, it was his tape. The same private footage I'd stumbled across, the same carelessness that had once violated me, had finally circled back to him. My phone buzzed that night. It was Ryan. Alyssa, he said, voice trembling. You didn't do this, right? Tell me you didn't. I didn't, I said calmly. But maybe now you understand what it feels like when your privacy becomes someone else's entertainment. He was silent. Then a soft, broken sound came through. The sound of someone realizing too late that the camera cuts both ways. Now that night, for the first time since my miscarriage, I slept without nightmares. Not because I was happy, but because I finally understood justice didn't always need noise. Sometimes it only needed time. The morning Ryan's scandal exploded, the entire internet turned into a feeding frenzy. I woke up to dozens of notifications, messages from coworkers, old classmates, even people I hadn't spoken to since high school. My name wasn't trending, but his was. In capital letters. Across every major platform, Ryan Carter, reality star, exposed in private video leak. For a moment, I just stared at the phone screen. His picture, smug smile, ring light reflection in his eyes, was everywhere. Beneath it were headlines that felt eerily familiar. Influencer known for family drama faces his own scandal. Reality TV star's private tape airs during primetime special. Irony at its peak. Ryan Carter, advocate for authenticity, exposed. It felt surreal, like karma had developed perfect comedic timing. Ethan walked in, towel over his shoulder, mid-sip of coffee. You've seen it? He asked quietly. I nodded, scrolling through the chaos. It's all over the news. He sat beside me, sighing. You think he'll call? He will, I said. People like Ryan only call when the camera turns against them. In Beaufortin. By noon, he did. My phone buzzed nonstop until I finally answered. His voice on the other end didn't sound like my brother. It was fractured, desperate, full of disbelief. Alyssa, please tell me you didn't do this. You didn't leak it, right? Tell me you didn't. For a second, I said nothing. I just listened. To the panic in his breath, the fear I'd once felt when my breakdown aired, the same helplessness now echoing through his voice. Ryan, I said calmly, I didn't touch your files. Then who did? How did they get it? That footage was private. Private, I repeated slowly. You mean like my bathroom floor? He fell silent. I could hear him breathing, shallow and uneven. Alyssa, this is different, he blurted. No, I said. It's not. You took my grief and made it your product. You turned my pain into entertainment. Now the world's doing the same to you. You're just getting the same treatment you called smart business. His voice cracked. I didn't think... No, you didn't, I interrupted. You never do, because for you, people only exist through a lens. But the lens doesn't love you, Ryan. It never did. He started sobbing. The same ugly, raw crying I'd once done on that bathroom floor. Only this time, he was the one being watched. Within hours, the media devoured him. The same network that had aired my breakdown was now running his exclusive exposure. They framed it as a cautionary tale about fame and boundaries. I didn't need to read between the lines. They were feeding on him the same way they had fed on me. Sponsors dropped him within days. The docuseries deal vanished. His social media accounts flooded with mockery. Guess karma rolls camera too. Mr. Authenticity got a little too real. How does it feel to be content, Ryan? The irony was poetic and brutal. My parents, of course, reacted exactly as expected. Mom called, her voice sharp and trembling. Alyssa, you have to help him. He's your brother. Help him? I asked. How? Issue a statement? Sell another episode? Don't be cruel. He's suffering. So was I said softly. But you called it ambition. Dad chimed in on another call later, sounding angrier than ever. You always wanted him to fail, didn't you? You're enjoying this. No, Dad, I said quietly. I'm not enjoying it. I'm remembering it. I hung up before he could answer. Meanwhile, Ryan disappeared. His house went dark. His phone eventually stopped ringing. I heard rumors that his girlfriend left him, that producers blacklisted him, that he'd checked into some wellness retreat in Arizona. But I didn't chase the details. I didn't need to. What mattered was the silence that followed, the kind that no camera could fill. A few weeks later, I got an email from a journalist who'd covered both of our stories. Would you like to comment on Ryan Carter's scandal? She wrote. People are calling it poetic justice. The sister he exploited staying silent as his world collapses. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. No comment, I typed. Just tell people this. Silence is not weakness. Sometimes it's a mirror. That night, Ethan and I sat on the porch, watching the rain streak down the window. The city lights blurred into golden streaks against the wet glass. For the first time in months, the air felt clean. You ever wish you'd done something to him? Ethan asked. No, I said after a pause. He did it to himself. People like Ryan don't need enemies. They just need time. He smiled faintly. You think he'll ever understand what he did to you? Maybe, I said. But understanding doesn't erase consequences. He filmed me crying for the world. Now the world's filming him. And I went inside later and stood before one of my paintings, a swirl of gray and crimson strokes titled Exposure. For the first time, I didn't see pain when I looked at it. I saw closure. The cameras had stopped rolling, but the lesson stayed. Ryan had once said my grief finally had value. He was right, but not in the way he imagined, because in the end, my silence wasn't just revenge. It was proof that dignity outlasts spectacle, and that some stories don't need to be filmed to be felt. In the weeks following Ryan's downfall, silence became my closest friend. It wasn't empty anymore. It was healing. It was the kind of silence that hummed with peace instead of pain. I didn't wake up dreading headlines or messages or the echo of my own sobs on national television. I woke up, made coffee, opened the curtains, and felt something I hadn't felt in almost a year: control. For so long, I had been the woman the world pitied, the sister with the miscarriage, the woman who was filmed crying, the victim. But now, quietly, without press releases or public revenge, that label began to fade. I had reclaimed my name, not through shouting, but through living. I started painting again, but this time the colors were different. Gone were the dark grays and suffocating blacks. My canvases began to bloom with light: soft golds, ocean blues, muted violets. The first painting I completed after Ryan's scandal was titled Redemption in Reverse. It showed two figures, one reaching for a camera, the other walking, away from it. The reflection in the lens showed not fame, but emptiness. It was the most honest thing I'd ever painted. When I posted it online, I didn't expect a reaction. But within hours, the comments started flooding in. Not gossip, not pity, but understanding. This is powerful. I felt this. Thank you for putting it into art. This made me rethink what content really means. For the first time, my story wasn't being consumed. It was being heard. Ethan and I started hosting small art therapy workshops at the local community center. At first, only a handful of people came. Women who'd been humiliated online, men who'd had private videos leaked, teens bullied for going viral without consent. We sat in a circle surrounded by canvases and brushes. No cameras, no phones, just stories, tears, laughter, humanity. One woman, a nurse in her 40s, told me, "They made a meme out of my breakdown. I thought I'd never smile again." I smiled gently. "I know that feeling. But you're here. You survived it. That's your story now." That became my mission, turning survival into strength, not through lawsuits or revenge, but through truth, without spectacle. Ryan never apologized, not directly. He sent one short text a few months later. "I hope you're okay." No, "I'm sorry," no acknowledgement, just a weak echo of concern. I stared at the message for a while before deleting it. Not out of anger, but closure. Because sometimes silence isn't revenge, it's protection. I later heard he'd moved to Portland, started working quietly behind the scenes for a production company. No more public appearances, no more vlogs. He vanished into the same obscurity he once feared. Maybe he learned something, maybe not. But that's not my story to tell. And as for my parents, their house became quieter too. Mom rarely posted on social media after the scandal. The performative smiles disappeared. Dad stopped bragging about our family brand. They still never apologized either, but their silence said enough. Sometimes guilt doesn't need words. It just lingers in the spaces where pride used to be. During Thanksgiving that year, I went home for the first time since everything happened. The table felt smaller, the energy subdued. No cameras, no show, just an awkward kind of stillness. Halfway through dinner, Mom softly said, "Your art's beautiful, Alyssa. I saw the painting online." It wasn't an apology, but it was a start. I smiled faintly and replied, "Thanks, Mom. I'm doing better now." For once, that was true. And in the months that followed, my workshops grew. I was invited to speak at schools about digital empathy and consent, explaining how sharing stories can become exploitation when you stop asking for permission. I didn't preach revenge. I talked about boundaries, the invisible walls that protect what's sacred. I told them, privacy is not secrecy. It's safety. It's the right to choose what part of yourself the world gets to see. Students listened. Some cried. A few even shared their own experiences. And with each story, I felt the weight of my own trauma lighten a little more. And one evening, I stood in front of a small crowd at a local gallery where my new collection, Silent Portraits, was being displayed. Each piece represented a person who had survived public humiliation, a teenage girl who had her photos leaked, an old man whose illness was mocked online, a mother who lost her job after a viral video. When the lights dimmed, I took a deep breath and spoke. We live in a world that rewards exposure, but punishes emotion. I learned the hard way that some people see pain as opportunity, but I also learned something else. That pain, when protected and transformed, becomes art. And art can't be stolen. It can only be felt. The audience was silent for a moment, and then they applauded, not for fame, not for spectacle, but for understanding. That night, I finally felt free. Sometimes I still think about Ryan, about how he once told me, "Your pain finally has value." He was wrong. My pain never needed to be sold to have worth. It just needed to be owned by me. And when his voice trembled through that phone, begging for the mercy he never gave me, I realized the universe doesn't need cameras to deliver justice. It just waits, patiently, until the lesson lands where it belongs. Now, whenever I see a camera, I smile, not with fear, but awareness, because I've learned the most powerful kind of story isn't the one that trends, it's the one that heals. If this story moved you, if it made you think about how fragile trust can be, or how powerful silence can become, then don't leave without showing your support. Tell me in the comments, have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely? How did you find your strength again? Your story might help someone else heal too. If you felt Alyssa's pain, her quiet resilience, and her journey from humiliation to peace, then please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel for more true, emotional stories of justice, strength, and redemption. Every story I share here reminds us that not all revenge needs fire. Sometimes the strongest revenge is simply healing and watching karma take its course. Thank you for watching. Stay kind, stay strong. And remember, some stories don't need to go viral to matter.